So we're still in Kingdom Choices. The larger text is Matthew 6:25 to 7:12. Yesterday, we really looked at a pretty sizable chunk, 9 verses, Matthew 6:25 to 34, regarding anxiety. Today, we're going to look at a smaller piece. Bella, I'm going to come to you for the reading of Matthew 7:1 through 5. And here, Jesus really defines the difference between grace and condemnation. He gives us an opportunity to remember that our imperfections are large and looming, and we would be better served to focus on God doing work in us than condemning others. Or one of the words I use in the book, which I totally stole from an author who was better articulating this than me, is censorious. Censorious? Wait, let me look. See, I don't even have a full handle on that word yet. Just the idea of like harsh judgment that does not really have grace in view. And so, yeah, like my mom used to say, that's the pot calling the kettle black. That's the same idea, right? Or also my mom used to say people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Have you heard that one? It's all the same idea. It's all the same idea that you're really not looking at yourself and realizing what's going on with you, and you're really just trying to focus on what's wrong with other people. Holier than thou is another way of expressing that. So we've all heard this in life, and so let's make sure that we hear it from Jesus. So Bella, if you would read that passage for us, please.
Judge not, that you be not judged, for with the judgment you pronounce you will be judged, and with the measure you use it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is the log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye.
Okay, I gave us a little precursor, but paraphrase it. Or contextualize it. What are some ways that we judge other people? What are some ways that you have felt judged? Let's be real.
An example popped in my head about standing in line, and the cashier doesn't seem to be in any particular hurry. And you're just watching this cashier, and you're saying, just be patient. And then you look over at the other lines, and they're moving. And so now you're giving the cashier the sign. You're judging her. You know, how dare you? What's the matter?
Hold me up.
Yeah, holding me up. What's the matter with you? But it wasn't until you compared her speed to the other ones that you got really impatient. So that's one example.
That's a good one. Any examples?
Again, I'm going to throw stuff in there like, okay, it's I guess the definition of the judgment, because I have to say to my daughters, I am judgy. They say I'm judgy, but I see it as an observation.
Oh,
so
here we go.
I guess it's that because when you were saying about the cashier, I don't think I'm judging the person, because judgment comes with to me, it's a different impression in my mind if I'm judging someone. I don't know if I'm trying to just walk that line
Scrape by.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is that judgy? Because if I am in need of getting out of the store quickly, that's a need of mine, and I see that this person is clearly, I feel it's factual that they're slower than the other person. Mm-hmm. But like when you said, if you're thinking, what's wrong with you? And then putting something on them that's not just an obvious impression of them, then I feel like that's...
I'm going to use this as an exercise to do what I think Jesus is calling us to do. I didn't plan this, but let's see how it goes. If we're in the line, okay, I'm not judging you guys, but if you're in the line and you're in the hurry, first of all, is that possibly because you didn't leave enough time for yourself? So is that really the cashier's problem? Or have you thrown that onto somebody else when you actually didn't leave your own time management? You're not holding on to your own time management and your responsibility there. Okay. I'm looking at myself. I'm the worst at time management. So please don't feel judged. But second, are we taking an opportunity to say, oh my goodness, I'm probably not the only one noticing that the other lines are going faster. She must feel stressed. How must she be feeling? What can I do to be Christ to her right now? That's a lot different. I mean, even if I got to my time and said, you're doing a great job. I hope you're having a great day. That can change a person's whole day. And you are not the only one who notices that she's going slower. She might be worried that she's going to lose her job. She might be worried that someone in the line is going to be mad at her or angry with her, or God forbid, say something critical of her. If we think that people can't see the look on our face and the way that we hold impatience in our body, we're wrong.
Yeah.
And how does that make her feel? That's the idea, that I'm leading with grace. And I'm saying, I can't think of the name of the address of the passage, but Paul says, considering others better than ourselves. That's what this is talking about. Instead of saying how what you're doing is affecting me, or how what you're doing is wrong according to whatever standard I put in place, Jesus is encouraging us to say, put yourself in their shoes. How must they be feeling right now? And then you would never say she's slow. She's slower, or wouldn't even think it. You'd be embodying Christ and saying, we're all doing our best. She's doing her best. Even if it looks like she's nonchalant, doesn't care, maybe she is, still doing her best. And that's just her countenance. You don't know her.
Yeah.
And that's what Christ is saying. While you were a disaster, I came and gave grace to you. How dare you, when you see someone else you judge as a disaster, not give grace to them? Assume everyone's doing their best. That's the best way to go through life. Just assume she is doing her best. Even if she's talking to somebody, maybe she's talking to someone because she's anxious, because she can't face the crowd that's building up. And who knows? Not you. We don't know why she's behaving the way she behaves. Just assume she's doing her best, whatever that best is. And I can assure you, when I was in my 20s, I was not as professional. I was not as organized. I was not as focused. Okay. At that time, I was doing my best. Am I able to do better now? Yes. But my better has nothing to do with what she's able to do. You had something you wanted to say.
No, I was just thinking that, well, that's the point, right? Being a Christian, why we're doing all this, why we're all here, is we're trying to live the life that Christ wants us to live, as human as we are, in every situation. And I always go back to this, I try my best through my failures. Am I doing it for the glory of God? Because if I am, then I will be able to offer that grace, extend that courtesy to people. Whereas when I'm not, I'm thinking, I am late. I am feeling the pressure. I am anxious now. You move faster to meet that. Whereas, if I
think impatience is an easy place to fall down on this. But we could also refer back to the Beatitudes. Blessed are the merciful, they shall receive mercy. And it's not transactional. What he means is, as mercy flows through you, you can more readily receive it. As to what you said before, like, how do I actually receive the healing from my anxiety through faith? I can block that up. And this is the same. I can block up the mercy and the grace. And if I'm not able to extend it, am I really able to feel it? Is there something deeper that says, if I don't deserve it, no one else does? And I don't believe I deserve it. So I'm going to be really harsh with the rest of the world, because if I don't deserve it, neither does anybody else. Like, there's a lot of deep stuff that can come into this.
And that could be subconscious too.
Exactly.
We're not conscious that we are, because of maybe something holding us back, now exhibiting all that baggage to the world.
If we feel not good enough, one of the most common ways to display that is by making other people feel not good enough. Because then somehow we feel a little bit better. It's messed up. But this is how this can play out in real life. Okay, Jan, would you read Romans 13, 1-5, and then Renew immediately after, please read 1 Peter 2, 13 to 17, because I'm going to give you a little introduction. What we aren't saying here is that so this passage can sometimes be misunderstood with respect to judgment. I think we just did the right work, but let's also talk about, does this passage mean Jesus is against judging anything, like in the courts? Certainly not. Let's read these two verses and move on from that.
Okay. Romans 13, 1-5. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and he will commend you. For he is God's servant to do good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, an agent of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also because of conscience.
Therefore, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme, or to governors as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. As free, yet not using liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king.
So clearly, human institutions put in place by God for judging good and evil and bringing consequences when appropriate. Okay, so that's not what this passage is about. It would not be, the Bible does not contradict itself. So these are places we need to dig in and be like, well, what does that mean in the context of, and we're going to do that elsewhere this week as well. So the next question is, does this passage mean we should never judge another person's actions? So this is where we get into some fun times, because I've just said lead with grace, and that's true. Bella, would you read 1 John 4, 1-6? And what we're going to listen for is how God calls us to be wise in discerning people's hearts by their actions. So just being wise. Leading with grace, but being wise. Go ahead, Bella.
Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, for many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and now is in the world already. Little children, you are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. They are from the world, therefore they speak from the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God. Whoever knows God listens to us. Whoever is not from God does not listen to us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error.
Okay, so what are we talking about here that's different than what we were talking about with the cashier?
There's a difference between judging just people that we can see with our eyes here and there, and then there's a difference between that and then exercising wisdom in looking at people maybe closer to us probably, but looking at people who are closer to us, their actions, and maybe detecting where Jesus is and is not in that kind of action.
Perfect. Oh my gosh, I have nothing else to say about that. Thank you. That was perfect. And actually, there's further text immediately following the passage we're looking at today. In verse 7-6, we're warned how to judge people that can inform us on when and where to speak. So we're going to talk about those dogs and swine tomorrow. And actually, the main points of Matthew 7:15-27 are about equipping us to identify wise and foolish folks around us. So clearly, there's an important call to understand how to accurately judge others. So what then do we learn from this passage? As I said, remember grace. Focus on our own sin first before we start pointing out someone else's downfalls. So another parallel passage for this, which I think is really great, is Luke 6:39, which you have, Jan, if you don't mind reading Luke 6:39. And then Renew and Bella, we're going to also read John 8:1-7. Renew, you have that, John 8:1-7. And Bella, you have Matthew 7:1-5 again, just to reiterate. Well, actually, yeah, I'll have you read it and then we'll sort of discuss how it interacts. But go ahead, Jan, with Luke 6:39.
Luke 6:39. He also told them this parable. Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into the pit?
Yeah, that's it, right? Like if I am trying to tell you how to behave when I myself am blind to my own sinful behavior, are either of us going to get it right? Or are we going to both fall into a ditch? It's a great little, I mean, it's just a little nugget, but yeah, right? And how many times have we said that? That's just the blind leading the blind. Neither one of them know what they're doing. Apply it to us. Okay, Renew, would you read John 8:1-7? That's a long one. And then Bella, I'm actually, rather than have you read Matthew 7:1-5 again, just have it in view while Renew is reading John 8:1-7. And let's just talk about how they interact together.
But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Now early in the morning, he came again into the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say?" This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. So when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first."
How does that interact with our core text today? Let's just talk for a hot second. I know everybody feels this way. What was he writing? I've heard one person say something really interesting. Of course, it's all totally speculation. So we're just using our imagination now. We're not adding to the text of the Bible. But one person I heard teaching on this said he imagined that Jesus was actually writing the names and the sins of the people who had come to bring her sin. Which gave me goosebumps because then the following passage, which is they all started to walk away. And he said, "He who is without sin, cast the first stone." But he's actually indicting them in the sand. That's interesting to think about, right? Just something to think about.
He was keeping score.
Well, that he's just exposing. That's what Jesus does, especially with the Pharisees and those who want to be holier than thou. He will expose you. If you come to him and say, "Jesus, fix that other person," the first thing he's going to do is work on your heart. Yes. And so I think that's just an interesting possibility about what he was writing in the sand. But how does it interact with today's text?
Well, about the judging, there's passing judgment without any of the grace or, and then speaking about the false prophets or false discipleship.
Yeah, it just kind of co-signs everything we've talked about. Even the cashier wasn't in a particular hurry. I've been that person.
Yeah.
I may not have been the cashier. I may have been doing some other function, but I was having that kind of day where I wasn't in a particular hurry.
Yeah. There have been times I've been late and held up whole groups of people. That's not good. Oh my gosh, I didn't mean to look right at you when that happened. I'm so sorry.
I didn't catch that.
Bella was a little late today, but it was not her fault.
It's okay to text
And
them.
we don't judge it.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, right? So if we're really examining, what am I mad about? Okay. So any more on that? I mean, it's pretty on the nose. It's pretty on the nose.
I
that
was
he
kind of
without
thinking
sin.
that, like, when I notice myself judging other people, it's usually like if I sit there and think, like, okay, where's this coming from, God? It's like usually literally just in an area that I'm insecure.
So totally
Right?
true.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it's like this awkward, like, that's like the log. Like, now I have this whole thing that I need to work on.
Yeah.
And pray and, like,
Yeah.
disclose and be vulnerable and talk to people about.
It's so great that you said that, because what you're really raising up is that sometimes God will allow us to see ourselves in someone else because he needs the mirror. And but we have to allow him to use that as a mirror and not a condemnation, like not our sitting on a high horse to say, oh, she's a mess. What he's really showing you is how you're a mess, and he has work to do with you. And that's humbling and that's convicting. But that's the idea behind this passage. If we really take it to heart, then everywhere we go, we should be looking at how are you teaching me a lesson in this moment, God? So that's a deepening of it that I love you just brought, Bella. Thank you so much.
And are we that different from the Pharisees? Are we not the Pharisees ourselves?
Perfect segue.
Okay.
So one of the things is that Jesus really warns us, if we place ourselves in the judgment seat, then we can't plead ignorance of the law that we're overseeing, right? So basically, if we put ourselves in the judgment seat, this is what he means by therefore be your righteousness must exceed that of the Pharisees and scribes. What he's saying is, unless you're perfect, you need the Savior, same as the next guy. So if you're going to sit in the judgment seat, then you are the authority and the law, but that means you have no room to mess it up. Well, none of us would sit in that seat if we thought about it that way. So let's let two passages inform us on how we can think that way more often. Jan, I'd like you to read James 4:11 and 12, and then Renew right after that, just read Romans 2:1-3. Please.
James 4:11 and 12. Brothers, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against his brother or judges him speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor?
You therefore have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else. For at whatever point you judge another, you are condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. Now we know that God's judgment against those who do such things is based on truth. So when you, a mere human being, pass judgment on them and yet do the same things, do you think you will escape God's judgment?
That came in hot. But we have to receive it if we're going to live into this piece of the Sermon on the Mount, which we are called to do. There's no excuse.
Right?
Now you know.
Yeah. And there's
even
only
if-
one lawgiver. And you're not it.
Yeah. I mean, basically, you're bumping him out of the seat. That's pretty.
Yeah.
That's pretty haughty.
Yeah, that's plain. Yeah.
Okay, so there's more passages in the book, but the last thing I want to make sure we have some time to look at is how this passage intersects with 1 Corinthians 5, particularly verses 12 and 13, which say, "For what have I to do with judging outsiders? Is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? God judges those outside. Purge the evil person from among you." This can be weaponized in church. This is a very tricky passage to deal with. And I'd like to just talk about how it intersects with today's text. So rather than contradicting each other, these two passages actually complement each other, because together they speak to the importance of both personal and corporate accountability in the Christian life. So Matthew 7, 1 through 5 teaches us not to judge others in a way that's hypocritical or unloving. Instead, we should be patient and merciful, seeking to help others with compassion and grace. 1 Corinthians 5, 12 and 13, on the other hand, reminds us of the importance of corporate accountability in the church. So it is the responsibility of the church to, I hate to use the word discipline because that's a hot word, but to discipline its own members to maintain the purity of the church, the purity of the community. So we really have to hold each other accountable, hold one another accountable, and seek to address sin within the church. Now, again, this can be weaponized. Of course, inside the church, it should also be grace-filled and love-filled. But the point of these two passages up and against each other, or really, I would rather say collaborating with each other, is there's a personal responsibility and then there's a corporate responsibility. And Jesus has high standards for the church. We shouldn't lower those standards in the name of not judging people, but we should carefully approach sin situations inside the church with love, but also with the tools that God gave us to say, this is not healthy for the body. This behavior that's existing in the church context is not healthy for the body of Christ. It doesn't honor the worship and fellowship that he called the body to have. And if it is not healthy, it has to be dealt with. And that may ultimately mean asking that person to take a break from church. But that's like the last resort. The last resort. The first resort should be fellowship, counseling, being pastoral with them, loving them, praying for them. So I just wanted to do a little bit with that passage. And then as we end today, that word censoriousness, again, which is a type of judgment that judges critically and harshly. In no case are we called to do that. In every case are we called to say, first, is this a mirror? Deal with me first, God. Hi, I'm Holly, and I'm the primary teacher and author here at Study with Friends. My education is from a Reformed theological seminary, so you'll see that come through as we teach and study together. But on occasion, I'll introduce concepts from other doctrines when I think they shed light on the material, just so that we can have a well-rounded understanding of lots of different perspectives on the text. We strongly believe that you should know and understand who's teaching you the Bible, and so you can learn more about me at studywithfriends.org or zondervan.com. We're just really glad you're here.